Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Legends of Tomorrow. So in this episode, we have the team going back to the year 1987, where we basically have Dark kind of being connected to the White House. Basically, it's during the Reagan administration, and he's trying to change some things. Like basically, essentially, he's trying to be in a situation where he gets makes a deal with the KGB to kind of essentially he stockpiling weapons just to kind of fulfill his whole plan. I guess this is kind of like the beginning works of his Genesis plan. Because Eobard kind of threw it out there to like, hey, I've seen your future, what happens to you and everything. He's like, I can give you power. Obviously, that meant the weapons and everything. Because at this point in time, Damien still doesn't have any of his magical powers that he had in Arrow and everything. So it makes me wonder, is Eobard the reason why he was able to get his powers? Like at the point where he did everything he does in Arrow. Because everything he's done in Arrow is the final step to everything. Like, it's kind of like, I guess when you like run it through and everything, because time is kind of set because of Flashpoint. Like everything that's happening on Legends of Tomorrow, like the timeline that Legends of Tomorrow is on is the timeline that exists after the events of Flashpoint, after the alternate timeline being created of Flashpoint. So all that stuff that happened was Dark is going to happen. It already has happened and it will happen, that when it's all said and done with this whole, because the whole thing is they're setting up Eobard as well as Dark to lead, obviously, the Legion of Doom. I kind of threw that out there before. I kind of got confirmation from other things and other people that they are setting up a Legion of Doom, which I know. There's like one character I'm not going to mention just because, I mean, if you know who it is, you know who it is, but I don't want to spoil that. I'm just curious how they're going to incorporate that, because it's going to interest, like, I think I brought it up last time, but it's like that character's introduction to the Legion of Doom is going to bring an interesting aspect from, I was thinking only one character, but it's also going to affect two characters, because it's like, oh, that character's return, because that character also had feelings with one of the characters, so that's another thing too. So there's at least, as the whole team is going to be affected, but it's like two people in particular are going to be heavily affected by. But I forgot there was someone else, and I just can't remember who it was. So that's going to bug me. So, but the fact is, no matter everything that goes down, we know where Dark's story ends. It's kind of like Eobard's story. We know what happens to Reverse Flash, but we still, because the whole time travel thing, you could have Eobard popping up at any point in time. It's like this is still part of his timeline before he went back in time and became Wells and everything. Back in season one of Flash, that type of thing. So there's still a lot of leeway with that. So it's the same thing with Dark. It's like, no matter what, it's going to play out that way. Because a big part of this episode, obviously, is the conversation of like, yo, we should change things. Definitely Jax has been like, yo, we got to change things. We have the power and everything. Stein being the realist and being like, we can't. You don't know the ramifications. Even if we do something good, who's to say that the domino effect won't be bad? It's like, we have no idea of knowing how the dominoes will fall. Jax is like, okay, we start off small, but then he's like, even the smallest change, you don't know the ramifications for it. Then they ask Sarah about it, and Sarah's kind of like in her heart, she agrees with Jack, but as from a leader standpoint, she has to agree with Martin. It's just like the duty that was passed on to them by Rip is to protect the timeline, because we saw that last episode was because like especially for Jackson, I think that's what inspired him, is the fact is that like he saw that situation. It's like initially he wanted to not change anything, but he couldn't help it because of just how bad things are. It's like we have the power to change history. Why not do it for the good? I mean, that's the sucky part of time travel. Like if there were no obviously, like if there were no consequences, everyone would go willy-nilly with the whole time travel thing, which is like, which is now kind of getting back to Eobard. Why the hell have the time wraiths not caught up to him? It's like, dude, you're doing all this wacky crap in the back in time. It's like, because the whole thing was like, because that was kind of something brought up in season 2 of The Flash when Barry went back in time and talked to Eobard disguised as what Wells, and it's like, confronted him and everything. He's like, oh, this time wraith is here. He's like, I made sure to cover my tracks well. So it's kind of like maybe he's still covering his tracks, because it's like screwing with time, all the time traveling you're doing. Because at the very least, when it came to Flash, he was in one particular time, he covered his tracks, and he wasn't time traveling all the time. So he was able to keep a low profile. But it's like, as you can see, he's bouncing through time all the time. So maybe this is a little bit before he came up with his plan and was able to kind of calm down. Because I kind of referenced this, I think, in Flashpoint for not Flashpoint, well, the Flash show, because I watched the like Justice League Flashpoint movie on Netflix or whatever, just to kind of get a little perspective on that Flashpoint versus the TV show Flashpoint. I knew there were going to be drastic differences because I already heard about what Flashpoint was like in the comic books and like the whatnot. And once again, I'll say it again, I know that Flashpoint's like a very like condensed version of the entire story. I'm sure there's a lot that was cut out and everything, but nevertheless, Eobard was so willing to let the world be destroyed, just if it meant destroying Barry. And I think that's kind of the same storyline we're getting here. It's just like he's screwing with all this different stuff because I think no matter what, his ultimate goal is to, it's still Barry, which I'm sure this all has to do with 2056 Barry being like, yo, there's a war coming. So, I mean, maybe not. Maybe this whole Legion of Doom thing is only the precursor to something much worse coming. So, which, like I said, still only have Stein and Jax who know about it. So, but that was the big theme of this episode, though, just whether to change time or not. Because even Jax had to call Sarah out for it, because it's like, yo, you found out Dark was here, and yet you couldn't help yourself but try to kill him. It's like, oh, we can't change the timeline, but when it comes to trying to get your revenge, then it's okay. Then it's obvious that when it comes to your revenge, you're the one exception to it and everything. Which led to an interesting conversation between Sarah and Stein. It's like, the fact of the matter is, once again, you don't know the ramifications of killing Dark. I mean, because, killing Dark, who's to say how much of a ramification, I mean, obviously it would have on Arrow. Like, I mean, who knows? Like, she comes back. I mean, maybe things would be better in some aspects and everything would be worse. I mean, who's to say, like, maybe if Dark was dealt with sooner, maybe Oliver never would have come back to Star City and became the Green Arrow, which ended up inadvertently creating even more problems later on down the road, because it's like, oh yeah, Oliver's not around anymore. He was off, kind of created a happy life of Felicity and everything. Who knows? Because that was the main thing that drew him back to Star City back in, at the beginning of season 4 and everything. So, it's just something like that. But she even went as far as telling Martin, is like, oh, obviously you've never really cared about someone because you'd understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's my sister. Which, Martin replied later on, is like, I care about you. Like, I care about you and I care about this entire team. I don't, for more so than anything, it's like, I want to protect your conscience. You're not part of the League of Assassins anymore. You're not kind of driven to kill someone. You're in a captain position. So you have to think, because it's like, even if she gets her revenge, she's going to end up staining her hands, and she's a captain. She's supposed to lead them into doing the right thing. They're on the side of justice, essentially. Because she ended up asking that question to Maya Vixen, asking her, like, she catches Rex's killer, then what would she do? Would she kill him and everything? But then Maya's like, no, I'll arrest him. I'm part of the Justice Society of America. Like, I'm not a vigilante. I'm a hero. I'm gonna do the right thing. I'm on the side of justice. So it kind of put things in a different perspective for Sarah. And then when you break it down, when it comes to Martin, he kind of knows that feeling. I mean, he lost his other half with Ronnie when it came to him closing that singularity. So he kind of knows what it means. I'm sure if he had the chance, he'd go back in time to try and fix that, but he doesn't know the ramifications. I mean, not just for himself, but also for Caitlin, because she lost her husband. So there, I mean, they didn't throw that example up there, but, that definitely could have been one. But what I do like is what Sarah did to Dark. Rather than killing him, it's like, rather than doing that, she kind of broke him down psychologically, being like, you know what? I know what happens to you. Your wife is murdered. You get so low because everything's falling apart. They even you kind of decide to kind of threaten the life of your child. Your whole Genesis plan, your whole arc plan falls apart. A whole city of people join up to fight you, and you lose and you die alone. It's like, I know your future. And it's like to kind of psychologically attack him. And I was also at the same time stealing from him, which Nate was like super impressed by. But the fact of the matter is that pushed Dark to be like, I'm going to change my fate. Similar thing to Eobard, which Eobard doesn't really 100% know his fate at the end of it all. Because it's like, I mean, that's the thing though. That's kind of always a question like, is there such thing as fate and destiny? Can you change it? And that seems like they're sure as hell going to try. So it's going to be interesting if we get to see that, though, like kind of a similar thing with Flashpoint where we see things kind of shift because we haven't really, I mean, obviously we've seen history shift, like, you know, with certain things and stuff like that with the Einsteins, for example. What I'm curious about, though, is will we see that kind of within Legends, kind of the ultimate effect of like the timeline shifting? Will it like how it would affect our shows? Like for instance, will we see the effects of like a timeline shift happening in Arrow? It's like if something happens with Dark, it's like Dark ends up becoming super powerful, and so that changes everything. Will we see a storyline like kind of like how we got what was it, 20 last season? It was like 2047 Star City. I'm just kind of curiously throwing that out there because that'd be kind of interesting to see whether that would, I don't know, like whether we get to see that within the show. Because like I said, I brought it up before, it's like Flashpoint's already happened. So all the timeline is kind of following, you know, the third timeline created because of Flashpoint, you know. So will we see deviations of that said timeline because of the whole time traveling and everything here in Legends? Or is everything kind of already set and stuff? I mean, because the fact of the matter is timelines kind of like are always kind of like a little, it takes a while for them to kind of 100% shift into place. So. And another interesting thing about this episode was Mick and Ray, because Ray is trying to be more like Snart, because that's kind of what Mick wants him to be. It's like, be cool like Snart, and then you have like Ray trying to do that, but it's not necessarily working out, because at one point he's like, Mick is telling him, like, yo, back away, and then like Ray's like, nah, because he kind of got caught up in the whole like, because it seemed like, because the whole thing was Mick was trying to make Ray more like Snart, kind of telling him that there's no rules, kind of be an outsider, kind of be more villainous, like act cool, be more calm, cool, and collected, and calculating like Snart was. But it's just simply because he missed his friend. The only real friend he ever really had growing up and everything, and he's gone and he misses him. And so when he sees Ray, like he's telling Ray to be more like Snart, but the more like Snart he is, the more it hurts. Because there was even a point where Ray was putting on his jacket and everything, and it hurt him. And so what he just, so really it's just, you know, Ray's still in that transition of trying to decide who he is and what he is. Like, you know, because for the longest time, to be the hero, he always relied on his suit. And I'll bring it up constantly again and again. It's like, even without your suits, you're a very smart dude. I was able to disable the bomb because of the whole situation with the using the freeze gun, which I'm like, why didn't you just freeze the bomb? Maybe like short circuiting that one bomb short circuit them all, because it was kind of like there were supposed to be bombs all over the place. Cause I was like, why don't you just freeze them? Wouldn't that be simpler? And interesting, I really like Mick's reaction of being like, 10 seconds to live. Well, there's worse ways to die. He's just sitting there eating like a donut or something, and then Ray solved everything. He's like, oh yeah, good job, haircut. Kept on eating like it was nothing. Just kind of shows you Mick's priorities. So. But like I said, I like the fact is that Ray is struggling with that, because that's always been his biggest flaw. It's like he wanted to be a hero. He wants to, the whole reason why he created the Atom suit in the first place, because he never wanted to feel powerless again. And now he has to decide, you know, who he's going to be. And like, you know, I mean, truth be told, that's something, you know, Martin brings it up, like everyone struggles with that, trying to decide who they are. And it's, you know, I'm probably sure even in Martin's case, it's like, no one really has that answer. You just kind of have to find it for yourself to really find out who you are and what you do. Like I said, Ray, he's a very smart dude. He's very capable. All he has to do is just do things his way. Because that was something I brought up last episode. At least I thought. I might have thought it. I'm not sure if I actually said it. But it's like, was he going to try and become more like Snart? So, but it seems like, you know, that was kind of this episode being like trying to figure out who he's going to be. And it's like, nah, just do you, be you. Don't try to be Mick. Don't try to be Snart. Just be Ray and handle things the way you would. So does that mean the cold gun is kind of out of commission now? Because the whole point was he was going to try and kind of fix some stuff to kind of make it kind of fit him more so than anything. Because the way it was kind of more attuned to how Snart used it. So it's going to be interesting to see whether Ray kind of fixes it up to kind of fit his style more. So, you know. A side note thing I'm curious about too, because the fact of the matter is they don't realize that the person that they're after is Eobard. I mean, because the only person amongst the group that's really had experience about going up against Eobard, Reverse Flash, is Stein. Because, there was like him, Oliver, and Barry originally captured him back in season 1. So obviously Stein has experience with him, but no one else. So it's like, oh, Eobard Thawne. So it's kind of like, because they know now that the person helping Dark is a speedster, and obviously he helped Dark kind of travel to a different point in time. Because prior to now, it's always been like, you have, immortality. So it's like, I'll meet you. It's like, for you, it's been like 40 years. For me, it's like, I just saw you like yesterday. So. And interesting to see Eobard handle things the way he does. Like, the guys were shooting everything. Yeah, Dark pulling out a gun, bullets flying everywhere, who not really caring. He's about to pull out his gun, and then Eobard shows up and takes everybody down, especially the last guy, and just snaps his neck. He's like, I had that handled. He's like, it wasn't fast enough. My way's faster. And it's like, it's nice to see you, old friend. He's like, old? Well, for one, really, that's subjective, calling me old. And they're like, friend, well, friendship has to be earned. So, like I said, I'm very curious to see them really get in, get really villainous. Obviously, they've been doing some villainous things, but really get super villainous. Like, they've been villainous, but I want to see them get all super villain-like and everything. So, and I think a final note of something I want to talk about is Maya in this episode. We ended up finding out her main reason, like, the whole Rex thing isn't just about, hey, like, he was a colleague and leader. It was also because, I was in love with him. We had a thing. Because she kind of chastised the legends for the fact is that they fraternize. Like, the fact is they get a little too close. They get a little chatty with each other. They don't keep it professional. Because she was like, that's what the JSA was all about. Like, you don't get too attached to people. You just you trust the people beside you, and then you do your job. Because, you have Nate asking a lot about his grandfather and stuff like that. But then you kind of understand the reasons why she's like that. It's because the fact is that Rex was someone that she really cared about, and like the JSA was kind of like a family to her. And it's like, I guess the fact is she left him behind. Like, this episode kind of put it in perspective for her that she left her family essentially behind. Because the whole point was eventually her and Rex, and once the war was taken care of, World War II, that her and Rex were going to leave the JSA just to kind of have a normal life, just to live their life. But, Rex dying kind of put that all perspective. Kind of threw that out the window. So it was more so about, not in a sense revenge, obviously, but, revenge never works out because it's not like you get any fulfillment. But it's like, I guess by stopping Eobard, you can stop Rex from dying. And I guess that's the whole point. See, I don't know how that's going to really work because it's like, we already know what happens to Eobard. So it's hard to say, like, him traveling through time, shouldn't that kind of all be undone by the fact is that he's dead? Like, that's where you kind of get to that whole convoluted things where it's kind of confusing. It's like, because really it makes sense because it's like, but the moment he's dead, shouldn't that wipe him out from all existence points in time? Kind of like the similar thing with Vandal Savage. But then I guess it's like his life happened. So it's like, once you get to the point back in season 1 of Flash, it's like his life will always end there, but his life up till there, obviously you can do whatever you want to with it, make it seem like he does all this, like I said, super convoluted, complicated and everything. So I'm not about to continue down that rabbit hole and everything, but I guess, it also put in perspective, she kind of sees like what happened to the JSA after she left. Things didn't work out because she wasn't there to kind of lead the team in Rex's absence too. So she went to, her and Nate went to that training facility, but it hadn't been used in like years because they kind of abandoned it and everything because not everything worked out. So it's going to be interesting to see what that means for Vixen kind of pushing forward, knowing the kind of future that waited for the JSA because she wasn't there. Will that change her mind that when it's all said and done, will her and Rex stay, or will that kind of motivate them even more that when it's all said and done for her to go even more so? And the whole thing with Sarah too, like, what will that all mean when it's all said and done? Will she actually do something to Dark? Like I said, the whole timeline thing, like, will that change? Like, how will that affect the timeline we already know for Arrow and everything? Like, I'm not saying it would directly affect Arrow. All I'm saying is that it would affect Legends of Tomorrow's Arrow, like any Arrow that would pop up and, like, once again, use an example of the 2047 episodes type of thing. So many questions. We'll just kind of have to wait to the next episode to kind of get any answers or kind of pushing forward about that. So Another thing I was almost completely skipped over in this episode is we had the return of Stein, young Stein, and you have Martin just being so obsessed and just disgusted. He's just like this kid because his whole timeline got screwed up this episode because it's like, I remember the fact is I never actually got into the White House. I never walked past Damien Dark, this whole situation when he was talking to that KGB agent and everything. So it's like none of that happened. It's just time's kind of been off a little whack. And so in this case, Martin's a little more focused on his work than he is Clarissa. And so, he's super upset and everything because, Ray kind of puts in perspective being like, everyone hates their younger self. They always look at me like, I can't believe this was me. And, once again, he's just like, I can't believe I was ever that person. Because it's just like, Martin's so focused, young Kim is so focused on his work, he's forgetting all about his wife. And there was even that moment later on where Martin was kind of dancing with his wife. You had that moment where Jack's like he was about to say something, but he didn't. Because it's a little weird, because it's like you're up there dancing with your younger wife and everything, trying to be, tell her like, no, it's okay. I'm a friend of Martin's. You should give him a chance. He's focused on his work, but really deep down, he loves you. Might not, he's an idiot about it, but he definitely loves you. It's kind of interesting that Martin ended up being his own best wingman, being like looking out for him, be like, no, everything's okay. Don't worry about it. And kind of putting in perspective for Martin, it's like, no matter what you win, they might win these prizes, science and everything. It's fine. It's fantastic. It's wonderful. But at the end of the day, the only thing that you will love, the only thing that will matter to you is Clarissa, because all that comes second to her because she's the woman you love, And that was very beautiful and touching. And I like that because the fact of the matter is with them doing the things that they're doing, Martin doesn't get to see his wife at all. And so it definitely put things in perspective for him when he thought he lost her, because it's like, because they changed time and everything. And it's like he never met his wife. And it's just like she slowly was fading away from existence. So that also put things in perspective for him, especially because the fact is he originally never told her what he was doing. He was so obsessed with the fact of time traveling and everything, because even this Martin is very different from the Martin we knew in season 1, because he went as far as drugging Jax to kind of bring him along and everything. But now he kind of puts things in more perspective and being like, no, what matters most is Clarissa because she's the love of my life and everything. So this Martin talking to him is very different from the Martin that talked to him back in season 1. So it's just kind of interesting. And I thought that was just kind of something I wanted to kind of note. So. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.